So I was like, why don't I start a podcast where you interview professional goalkeepers and you find out what their lived experiences are and what they experience on the pitch. So I essentially started the podcast, got a bunch of really great guests on who have played in the Football League, played in the Premier League. And the reason I don't regret it is because I wouldn't have been one that made it all the way. I would maybe have played as high as League Two, the National League, because of my height, if I did really, really well. So, you know, having that education and backup plan was really important for me, and it allowed me to leave the sport gracefully. So I'm actually fully employed by QPR, so I work there as their KNP Sports Psychologist. So I work with some of the first team lads, the B team players, the under 18s.
You alright, mate? How are you today?
Yeah, I'm very good, mate. Thanks for having me on.
That's alright. It's been a long time. Obviously, I'm not at my usual studio today. Just why don't you explain? But first, before you explain, why don't you introduce yourself to the viewers?
Yeah, so my name's Keval Patel and I'm a high-performance psychologist working at a championship football club.
Lovely. So, obviously, we're not at my usual studio today. Just explain what has happened and why we are not at my usual studio.
Yeah, so alongside my normal line of work, I still play semi-professional football. And 2 weeks ago, I was involved in a pretty horrific injury where basically I had a collision with the forward because I play in goal, and part of his stud basically sliced open part of my knee. So I had 11 stitches in A&E at Norfolk Park, just around the corner from here, 4 in the actual wound itself because it was that deep, and then 7 on top. And yeah, I've been out of work and out of action for the last 2 and a bit weeks now, so hence why I couldn't drive to you today, mate.
So from an early age, who got you into football or sport in general, and what sports were you playing growing up?
It was mainly my dad, if I'm being honest. My dad was really a sporty guy, and he played a variety of sports: golf, cricket, rugby, football, and he always used to come home from playing five-a-side in the evenings after work. And obviously the house was just littered with football stuff everywhere. And that was kind of the way that I got into it. One day he took me to the park and we just had a kick around, and like every kid, you just kind of fall in love with the sport because you see so much of it on television, you're exposed to it, it's our national sport. And yeah, joined my local Sunday club, Harrow St Mary's, where a few of the guys that I went to school with were obviously members of the club.
So how did you get into goalkeeping? Because obviously as a kid you're going to want to be a striker, not you specifically, but then how did you end up being a goalkeeper?
I was part of a Sunday league team which just had the most ridiculous group of players, and every single one of them in the A team was pretty much signed up with an academy. I think 4 of the lads were signed at Chelsea, 1 was at Arsenal. So my dad was like, look, you're not going to get in the team as an outfield player. Why don't you go in goal for the B team and try your trade out there? And I was like, no chance, like goalkeeping's for losers, like who would play in goal, who wants to dive around and get muddy? And he's like, just try it, you'll enjoy it. So I went down to the B team and I played in goal, and in my first game I saved 2 penalties. Wow. And I played really, really well, and I actually quite enjoyed it. And it was just from there I was just like, this isn't so bad.
So obviously from then, obviously I know you were at different academies growing up as well. So from that, playing for Harrow St Mary's B team in goal, what was the process of becoming a more improved goalkeeper and getting into these different academies?
Well, I think the first thing is to get scouted and to get recognised for your ability, and I got lucky, like most people do. So the lad that was playing for the A team is also from South Asian heritage. So when I was playing in my game for the B team and I saved those 2 penalties, the scout actually mistook me for me being him. Wow. Yeah, I know.
Lucky, that's so lucky.
It's so lucky. So the scout contacted the father of that player and said, oh, your son played really well in the game at this venue. And the dad was like, that wasn't my son.
Mistaken identity.
Essentially, yeah. So the details obviously got passed around and we ended up getting in contact with the scout, and that's when I landed my 6-month trial at Chelsea. And it was a great learning curve for me. I was there for 6 months. I didn't get a contract at the end of it, but I developed so much as a goalkeeper to the point where when I came back to Sunday League football, my trade had improved and I'd sharpened my skills, and that landed me the role at Watford.
So going back to the Chelsea for 6 months, so what was that like as a kid growing up? Obviously you're watching football and you're at Chelsea, your very first day. What do you remember from that day and what was that like?
I just remember driving into the training ground at Cobham. Obviously it's changed a lot since I was last there, but when you drive into the training ground, you just get this awe and this feeling that you're surrounded by excellence and high performance. And it's indescribable. It's just a different feeling that you have to when you're playing Sunday League football, because you know you're in an environment where the likes of John Terry, your Petr Cechs, Drogba's, all of those top players are, playing and plying their trade.
So what was that like? Obviously, what were your best experiences from those 6 months at Chelsea?
I think John Terry coming and watching us train in the Dome, that was a highlight. Just having a person of his calibre there watching us train was a great highlight. And the 3 games that I played for them as well. When you're on trial, you have to play a certain number of games, and just being able to put on the shirt and say that I played for them was a huge honour for me.
So obviously the highest of highs when you're at Chelsea, and you said John Terry coming to watch. But obviously on the flip side, what were the toughest moments that you experienced as a young kid at a really big club?
Oh, the release meeting. It's the worst part of it, because you get called into this meeting, right? And it's like a boardroom. So you've got this big long table in this room, and you've got the officials from the club sitting on the other side of the table. And it's basically just a very honest conversation about how you've done. And unfortunately, my decision was a no, just because I hadn't performed up to what their standards were.
Did you know that within your heart, or did you think I could potentially get past this trial?
I think you're always in denial. I think you always tell yourself that you're going to be the one that gets signed. But I knew in my heart I hadn't done enough, just because, in all honesty, I didn't apply myself well enough. I got caught up in the badge and the training ground and the free boots and all that sort of stuff. I wasn't working at my optimum when I was there, and it was a big learning curve, because I knew going to another club that as long as I work hard and I apply myself every day, I'm going to have a better chance of getting a contract.
So you get released from Chelsea and you're 10, 11 years old. You said you went back to Sunday League. How quickly was it before you got signed for another academy?
Oh, it was probably about 2 weeks.
I love that.
Yeah. So I got released from Chelsea towards the start of the summer, and then obviously you have the summer tournaments, which all the Sunday League teams play in. Played in a few of the tournaments during the summer period, and got picked up by a few scouts from Spurs, QPR, Watford, and ended up going on trial at Watford because the training ground isn't too far from here. And
don't give away your location.
Yeah, definitely won't do that. But they just said, look, we want to sign you. I was a lot bigger than a lot of the lads at the time as well. I grew very, very quickly as a young goalkeeper, so that obviously helped me. And I signed literally within 2 or 3 games of playing for them.
So how long were you at Watford for, and what were the comparisons between Watford and Chelsea?
So I was at Watford for two years. Yeah, 2 years. The main comparisons, obviously, facilities and the standard of coaching that you get. At Chelsea, obviously, you're dealing with the highest calibre of people, whereas at Watford, and this is no disrespect to Watford as a club, because it's a fantastic club, but they obviously have less investment and less money to invest in the club, so the training facilities aren't as good, and obviously the facilities they had at Cobham were just ridiculous.
So, again, I'm going to ask you a similar question. What were your best memories at Watford? Because obviously at Chelsea you had John Terry come and watch. Was it a particular game you played in? Did you save like a massive amount of shots in a game that won you man of the match, for example? So what were your best memories at Watford?
I've got 3. Number 1 was probably meeting Ashley Young.
Wow.
And him signing a playing picture of me. That was a pretty cool experience at the time where he was on the up at Watford and he was just about to sign for Man United. The second one was playing at Vicarage Road. That was an unreal experience.
So what was that like as a kid? So you get onto your third one in a minute. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
So what was that like playing at a professional, I don't know what league they were in back then. Premier League, was it?
Yeah, they were Premier League, yeah.
So what was it like playing in a Premier League stadium, and what was that like for you personally and your family?
Oh, it was unreal. I mean, to describe it to anyone, just imagine walking out of a tunnel and just seeing that ground open up as you walk out, and you see everything. You just take it all in, and your voice echoes off the stands. You know, everyone's on edge and they're playing that 5 or 10% better because of the environment, and the pitch is nice. It was just the most unbelievable experience. You could visualise yourself playing there one day with all those thousands of fans there. Unfortunately, I never got there, but you can see the picture. The dream becomes real for that day.
Yeah. So, and your third best moment?
Meeting Ben Foster.
Meeting Ben Foster.
It was just the most ridiculous experience of my life. He's such a nice guy, and anyone who watches his podcast as well, you can see what a nice guy he is. So yeah, that was legend. I've got a shirt somewhere upstairs which has been signed by all the Watford players when I got released from there. So yeah, they looked after me well. So
you just mentioned that you got released from there. Again, was it like a meeting that happened when you got released? Because you said you were there for 2 years, and I'm guessing you were about 13 at this point.
Yeah.
So what was that like, getting released again at such a young age?
It was tough, and we didn't have a meeting. It was done through the post.
Oh, wow.
It was done through the post, so you get a letter sent from the club saying you're not going to be kept on, and then you have the option to leave completely at that point, or you can continue for the rest of the season. Obviously, the way that they release players now has changed, and you have formal meetings because obviously it gives players that closure they need for their mental health, etc., and their identity. But back then, it was just a letter through the post. There you go, your contract's not going to be renewed.
Wow, that is harsh. So obviously, we're the same age, and at this point when you're 13, we've played against each other for school. Yeah. And we've ended up going to the same school and playing with each other as well. So obviously we met indirectly. I just remember I took a corner. I think you guys won 4-1. I think, was it 3-1, 4-1? I remember taking a corner and I whipped it in. I'm like, yo, how's this keeper got this ball on the penalty spot? I'm like, this is mad. So that's where we met. So obviously playing for school and playing for academies, did you find it incredibly easy against other schools?
It wasn't that it was easy. I always approached the games with a certain level of respect. It was more a case of you just had this confidence. You just knew walking out on the pitch that you were more than likely going to be better than 90% of the players there. And I think that's what helped me perform better at school. It's just that confidence of knowing that whatever you're experiencing in the week with your club, that was preparing you to deal with the majority of situations at school.
So obviously we went to the same school after, literally the year after we played each other, because we were in year 8 at the time. Obviously I know, but just explain what were the opportunities that you got at school, because we did go to a very good school, the opportunities you got to play football for school.
Yeah, so obviously got to play for the first 11, which was wicked. Obviously the facilities at our school were unbelievable. I mean, the pitches were just a joke. But it was tough though, like balancing education and football at that point. I was on day release as well, so I was doing essentially 4 days of school a week with 1 day full time.
So where were you at? What club were you at that point?
Yeah, so I was at Wycombe to begin with, and then Wycombe obviously shut down because of the EPPP system. And then I ended up going to Stevenage and signing there for 2 years on my scholarship during my A-levels. And I was doing 4 days of school a week, so it was hard to balance the football and the education, but listen, if you've got a dream, you find the way to make it work, right?
Yeah, exactly. So obviously the opportunities we got at school, did that help you become more of a leader in school and into academy systems? Because obviously, as you said, you're going to be better than 90% of the players, so you can lead that team and you can be that leader. And obviously we obviously went to a trip to South Africa as well, which you can talk about there. So what was that like playing for school and academies at about a teenage level and playing in South Africa as well?
Yeah, I think school gave me a better perspective than most guys that I was up against in the academy system, just in terms of the reality of making it. Like, I think a lot of kids now are I don't want to say delusional, but it is delusion that they're going to be the one that makes it, and they might well be. But the reality is that for 99% of players in the academy system, you're going to end up working the normal job or playing non-league or kind of lower league football.
Yeah.
So for me, going to private school, because I was lucky enough to go there, that reality became quite quick for me. So I had my plan B lined up, whereas most of the other lads that I was playing with at Stevenage or other clubs didn't have that vision like I did. And some of them are doing very well for themselves, don't get me wrong, but having that vision early is important because it allows you to transition away from the sport quicker. In terms of the South Africa trip though, I mean, travelling the world, experiencing different sports and different cultures, I mean, that was unreal. I mean, you were on that trip with me. And
that was a crazy trip. Obviously, you're with all your friends. It was a football, cricket tour, and obviously there's 4 teams there. So you're playing against teams from South Africa. Why don't you explain your experiences from that trip, because this podcast is all about you.
Yeah, no, it was wicked. So we played football and cricket over there. We got to travel, see Tabletop Mountain down in Cape Town. Stayed in a lovely hotel, which was nicely situated next to a casino, which is good.
And a big complex with a lot of restaurants. It was wicked.
Yeah, it was a great trip, and I think that was kind of like almost like when you see big teams travel away for Champions League fixtures. That was almost like our taste of that.
Yeah.
Travelling on a plane together, travelling around the country and playing different fixtures against different teams. And the cricket was great as well. I'm not a massive fan of cricket now like I used to be. I love T20 but not Test cricket. But that was a chance for us to play cricket out there as well. And obviously South Africa is a massive cricket country. So yeah, the facilities they had over there were great as well. So it was a nice experience for us, I think.
So obviously you're at Stevenage. What ages were you from Stevenage at?
So I joined in the end of my under-16s year, and then I did 2 years worth of scholar football as well, so under-17s, under-18s.
So what was that like You got a scholar. So what was that like in those 2 years at Stevenage?
Yeah, it was tough. It was really tough. So I did a part-time scholar, which is where you do a hybrid between education and football. Most of the lads there were full-time, so that put me at a disadvantage anyway. And I think culturally in the dressing room that affected me a lot, because obviously those lads were always working together, whereas I was just kind of in and out of the environment every now and then. Probably didn't develop as much as I could have as well, because I wasn't training as much.
Is that a regret that you have?
No.
Or no?
No, I don't regret it. And the reason I don't regret it is because I wouldn't have been one that made it all the way. I would maybe have played as high as League Two, the National League, because of my height, if I did really, really well. Mm-hmm. So, having that education and backup plan was really important for me, and it allowed me to leave the sport gracefully, whereas you see a lot of stories now where players struggle with their identity and their mental health when they get released.
So what was that like? Obviously, you finished your scholar. What was the story after your time at Stevenage?
Yeah, so I kind of just jumped into non-league football, went and played for Harrow Borough, which was a great club. Steve Baker really looked after me there as a young goalkeeper. And I kind of floated around some professional clubs as well. So I got the opportunity to train with Fulham's under-21s, because the goalkeeping coach I worked with there was at Wycombe with me. And I got to train with Leyton Orient's first team as well, because they were short on numbers. So there were a bunch of opportunities that popped up. I ended up doing some filming for BT Sport as well, which got featured on the Premier League show.
Wow. So how did you get that opportunity? It
was through a contact that I had called Martin Brennan. He was a goalkeeping coach at Wycombe. And we've stayed in contact, and we're still in contact now, funnily enough. And he's kind of looked after me through my entire career. And I just think in football and in life in general, you need to have people that are looking out for you the whole way through. And I've been fortunate enough to have him, so he's presented me with a lot of opportunities.
So you said you've bounced around different non-league clubs. What are your best memories and who have you played for? But more importantly, what are your best memories from the time you left Stevenage to now playing for different non-league clubs?
Yeah, one of my best memories of non-league football is when I was at Harrow Borough and we got through to the first round of the FA Cup. And we ended up playing against Northampton Town at Sixfields.
Wow!
I wasn't involved in the squad due to injury, but I got to travel with the team, and I was in the dressing room and stuff before the game, and it was just a surreal experience. There were thousands of people there, obviously watching, and here we are, Harrow Borough from the Ryman Premier Division, playing against League One Northampton Town. So that was a cool experience. I think playing in the FA Cup as well, just in non-league in general, was a big achievement as well for me. I think a lot of people dream to play in the FA Cup, and when you get that opportunity, you want to take it with both hands, and I got that chance at Westfield. So yeah, again, very grateful to them for giving me that opportunity and that chance.
So what are the toughest moments of non-league? Because obviously it's not the glitz and glamour of the Premier League. So what are the toughest moments being a non-league footballer?
I think anyone that's played non-league will tell you that the hardest thing about non-league is the uncertainty. I've played for clubs where you get promised certain things at the start of the season by managers about having a certain amount of game time and being the number one, and then come the first game of the season, they drop you. And I think because when you're at a club, there's certain quotas of games that you've got to play. When you're in non-league, because you're on non-contracts essentially, you can get dropped, you can get released, you can get bombed out very, very easily by clubs, and you see it everywhere.
So is it difficult, especially as a goalkeeper, because obviously there's like probably 2 or 3 goalkeepers per squad, per team, and obviously one of you gets to play. So what is that like when you think you're the number one, but then obviously you're not? So what is that like? It's
really tough. It's really tough. And you've got to remember, people at non-league level are investing a lot of time and a lot of money to travel around the country to play for these clubs, right? Just as much as the clubs are investing in the facilities, etc. So it goes hand in hand. But more importantly with goalkeeping, what happens at non-league level is that managers tend to have goalkeepers that they've worked with in the past, and those goalkeepers will travel around with those managers. So if you're at a non-league club and there's a manager change, you can bet your bottom dollar that he's got someone lined up to bring in. So that's a really difficult thing to contend with.
So is that the toughest thing of being a goalkeeper, or is it being the last line of defence and the pressure that you feel during a game? So is that the toughest thing about being a goalkeeper, only having one position available?
I think it's the responsibility of the position. I don't think it's necessarily just the fact that there's only one that brings its own pressure because of competition. I think it's the responsibility of the position. You have the ability to influence the storyline of the game. You make a mistake, it's more than likely going to cost your team. You make a great save, you're more than likely going to save your team a point, minimum. So the margin for error in goalkeeping is so different compared to any other position on the pitch. While if a forward misses a goal or a chance, the game might end up in a draw. If you make a mistake, you could cost your team 3 points.
Yeah, that is tough. But obviously then the dynamic between the different goalkeepers in the team. So obviously you play for Hillingdon Borough right now, and obviously you're injured, so you're not playing at the moment. So what is the dynamic like between, I don't know how many goalkeepers you have, two or three in the first team? So what is that like between yourself and the other goalkeepers?
In fairness, it's actually just me at Hillingdon Borough.
Okay.
But they've obviously brought someone in to cover me at this moment in time. But when I've been at previous clubs, it really depends on who you get and the characters that you come across. Most people, generally speaking, in the Goalkeepers Union are quite friendly, and everyone kind of gets on with one another. But I have been at clubs where people are quite, I wouldn't say salty, but more shady, or they don't try and build that relationship with you because they just want to see it as a competition. But from my experience, the best working relationships are when both of you get on and you try and push each other.
So obviously, what were the toughest moments in those? Like you said, people trying to be shady. I'm not asking you obviously to name names, but what do they do to make you feel like, oh, he's not like kind of on my side. He's not. I'm not relating to him right now.
There's so many tricks of the trade that people do in those situations. Like, I'm sure anyone who's played in goal will relate to this. But like when you're doing goalie sessions, for example, and you're doing drills, they'll just hammer the ball in the top corner to kind of break your confidence, or they'll kick the ball a little bit harder than they're meant to. Things like that, or when you make mistakes in games, they won't kind of put their arm around your shoulder like other goalkeepers would. Mm-hmm. They'll kind of just not say anything and almost hope you make a mistake. So there's small things that people do psychologically in those environments that, you know, they get away with essentially. But generally speaking, people are quite good, particularly goalkeepers.
So obviously the Goalkeepers Union is a big thing then. So I know that you've got a podcast. How did you? Why don't you tell me about your podcast, how you started it, and all that?
Yeah, so the podcast that I run is the Goalkeepers Mindset. So, like most people, in lockdown, everyone just had so much spare time, and I was like, right, well, I need to do something here to keep myself ticking over.
Me too, that's why I started this exact YouTube channel.
And it's weird how things transpire, right?
Yeah.
But I started it in lockdown, and I was like, what's one thing that people really struggle with in terms of goalkeeping? Obviously, there's loads of coaches out there, there's loads of S&C work. And I was doing some research, and there's literally nothing on goalkeeper psychology, and the position's so different to any other position in football. So I was like, why don't I start a podcast where you interview professional goalkeepers and you find out what their lived experiences are and what they experience on the pitch. So I essentially started the podcast, got a bunch of really great guests on who have played in the Football League, played in the Premier League, and I started a Twitter account to market it, and within like the space of maybe 6 months to a year, the podcast had blown up. It had like 10,000 listens. It had about 2.5k followers on Twitter.
Wow.
And I was just posting all this content about psychology, and I couldn't believe the receptiveness of the community to that information. And I'm still running it now, albeit not as frequently because of work. But yeah, it's just fascinating, and hopefully I'm trying to push the message that mindset matters when it comes to goalkeeping.
So obviously you've also got your own business, and that is psychology. Did you do psychology at uni? So do you want to talk to me about what your experiences were like with psychology at uni and your football at uni as well?
I didn't really take my university degree seriously, if I'm being honest. It was like most people, when you get into university, you're there to enjoy the environment, have fun, meet new people. But I was obviously playing football at the time as well, non-league as well as at university. So I had to be a little bit focused in terms of my training and my gym work. But yeah, psychology was interesting in uni. A lot of it you still use implicitly in your work, but it wasn't focused around sport. It was just general psychology about people's behaviour, their feelings, personality traits, that kind of stuff. It wasn't really until I did my Masters where I kind of specialised in sport and found that niche.
Okay.
And that's when the sports psychology stuff kind of came about, where you learn about how to perform under pressure, visualisation, self-talk, that kind of stuff.
So your football at uni, I think I know what you're going to say, what your best moment was.
Yeah.
But go on. Or what were your best moments at uni playing for Nottingham?
Yeah, it was definitely playing at Varsity.
I knew that.
Yeah.
I knew you were going to say that.
It was just surreal, mate. Like 5,000 people at Meadow Lane where Notts County play, you know, in front of all your mates. It was just a ridiculous experience. Obviously, the result didn't go our way, and I probably could have played better in the game. But I think just that chance to kind of live what a professional would live like for a day, playing in front of that many people, was just ridiculous.
So obviously at Varsity, you're playing in front of 5,000 people. That's the end result of which is the game. So when you woke up, what were you feeling, and what was your day like up to the game?
My preparation probably killed me, if I'm honest, because I didn't have any knowledge of what I have now, but I changed everything about my preparation. Normally I'm really simple with my prep. I just eat some food and kind of go and play the game. But in that day, got a haircut the day before the game because obviously you want to look good for the cameras and the people watching. Bought some new sock tape and stuff from ProDirect and bought new boots for the game, and I just did everything so extra. And I think in my head that was like building myself up to go and play in front of all of those people. I was a fresher as well, so I was young compared to the other lads.
Okay.
I think I was one of 2 freshers in that team, and I just prepared the wrong way. I built the game up in my head so much to the point that when I actually got there, it was almost too much.
You're mentally drained.
Yeah, I'd been playing the game in my head since the morning, whereas all I needed to do was turn up and play the game when I arrived at the ground. So if I had the knowledge that I have now, I would have prepared completely differently, but we made a big day out of it. We got taxis to the ground, we had a pre-match meal together at a restaurant, and it was all just too much. I reckon what they did was probably they just rocked up to the game, performed, and that's the reason why they smashed it. So preparation went a long way to my downfall and the team's downfall, I think.
So now, obviously, what you know now compared to what you did before, what's the biggest piece of advice that you can give to a young goalkeeper, especially with your psychology company?
Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Stick to what you know and don't overcomplicate things. I think the one thing that I see with the players that I work with is that when they get to big moments in their career or big games, they'll completely try and change what's brought them success in the first place. Stick to what you know. Keep the game simple. Even in the games themselves, keep it simple. You don't have to go looking and searching for things to do in a game. Let the game come to you. And that's probably the biggest lesson that I've learned through the work that I've done, is that when you keep things simple, the brain performs better and your body performs better.
So with your psychology company and you're working with professional clubs, so what clubs are you working with and what's your role within those clubs?
Yeah, so the business is separate from the work that I do at clubs. So I'm actually fully employed by QPR. So I work there as their KNP Sports Psychologist. So I work with some of the first team lads, the B team players, the under 18s, and the under 23s as well. So I work with all of the lads that are aspiring professional footballers, which is great for me because I can pass on some of that wisdom that I've gained through my career, and it's been a great experience. I get to travel with the groups to matches, I get to sit in stadiums and watch games. We get to go to the first team matches and watch the first team play, which is a brilliant experience. And because we've moved everybody onto one training ground now, before we used to be split, you obviously get to interact with the first team players, which is nice because you can kind of learn how to operate in that environment, and it's really been great for me in terms of my learning as well. So yeah, it's benefited me in a lot of ways.
So we're coming to the end of the podcast. So the question I normally ask you now, or all my guests now, where do you see yourself in 5 years playing football and your career? So start off with where you see yourself in 5 years playing football.
I don't know. Probably still playing non-league. Probably more on the golf course than I am going to be on the football pitch, because I'll scale back eventually just because of the travelling. And in terms of my career, I'd love to work in Premiership football. I really would. I'd like to work in Olympic cycle as well as a psychologist. I think those are my 2 goals. And I'm about to start a PhD as well in September, hopefully. So hopefully I'll have that under my belt as well.
I wish you all the best for everything in the future for you. But before we finish, I want you to look into your camera there. Yeah. Tell them to follow your socials. What are your socials? And tell them to follow you.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at the GK Mindset, and Instagram, the Goalkeepers Mindset, and also KNP Sports Psych.
Love that. So make sure you follow Keval on all his socials. If you did enjoy that video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel, and follow his socials. And don't forget, I'll see you later for more. Thank you, bro.
No worries, man.
Oh, that was sick.
Done?
Yeah, man.
Sweet.
Safe.
That was easy.
Sick.
This gear is unreal.
Cheers, bro.